Salutations once again to the Truth Core, whoever or wherever you may be. I'm here again today with some words about murder. Needless to say, that's a strong word and a controversial topic. I think it's fair to say that there are probably two general positions on the act of murder. One would be that it is categorically unacceptable and should not be committed. And the other position would be that it is conditionally acceptable. It is the right and necessary action in certain cases. So whichever view you hold, I invite you to sit back and keep an open mind regarding what comes next. Murder is something that can happen in many ways. It can be hidden. The act of murder of one human being by another could be committed in complete concealment or secrecy. Then, on the other hand, murder can be committed right out in the open. In my view, that is precisely what is happening today all across the world. Not in every single country and place, but in a great part of the world, an act of murder is underway. Mass murder is happening daily in the world where you live. And I think this is an irrefutable fact and an observation that any sane person will confirm. I am sure that at one point or other in your life, you heard about mass murder being committed. Genocide, they call it. So you may know about the historical facts. The mass murder in Russia under the Bolshevik regime, for instance. Alexander Solzhenitsyn reported, and he should know, that there were something like 70 or 75 million people murdered by the Bolsheviks. The mass murders in China, in Africa, in Cambodia, the killing fields, you might have heard about these incidents. But the mass murder that is underway today trumps all of those previous cases. It is the most brutal and extensive act of mass murder that's ever been committed in human history. And you can see it right before your eyes. Now, in order to talk about murder in the beauty to come, I'll use a tool, the concept of mirroring. I often use this tool in various ways. The concept of mirroring, or the mechanism of mirroring, can be extremely helpful in learning about human behavior, both individual and collective. So to introduce the topic, I want to mention a book. It's called The Serpent and the Rainbow. It was written by an American anthropologist named Wade Davis. And it records a journey, an investigation that he undertook. He went to Haiti for the purpose of trying to discover what is actually the formula used to zombify someone. So he went to investigate voodoo, or voodoo, as they call it in Haiti. And he wrote extensively about it, and I know no other book, except perhaps The Divine Horseman, by Maya Deren that gives a deep and authentic look, takes a deep and authentic look into what is voodoo, the Haitian form of voodoo. The Serpent and the Rainbow is an extraordinary book. He wrote it beautifully, and there are passages in it where he evokes the people and the landscape of Haiti, which are really, really moving and beautiful, really. So it's a rare journey into the heart of this phenomenon called voodoo. And it's appropriate to raise that subject because, in effect, the world today is under a voodoo spell. Call it the virus voodoo. So there's something that Wade Davis says in that book which falls into the category of mirroring. He says that evil is the mirror of good. In other words, when you look at evil, at any evil event taking place, what you see, or what you can see, if you take it as a mirror, is your own goodness. So Wade Davis overthrew a popular proposition which basically goes back to C.G. Jung, and this is a proposition that I utterly reject. The notion of psychological projection and the shadow. So according to Jung, if you see evil externally out there anywhere in the world, then actually it's a projection of the evil in yourself, a projection of the shadow. I totally reject that proposition and pretty much everything else that C.G. Jung said. So I prefer to hold by this other proposition that evil is the mirror of good. So when you look at the evil operating in the world today, massively destroying lives, destroying societies, causing suicide, causing the breakdown of families, causing enormous grief and due to the separation of people, causing the loss of future lives, impacting future generations, destroying the possibilities for young people to proceed with their lives and develop their talents, destroying education. When you look at this massive onslaught of evil, you have the opportunity to see the good in yourself. But if you see it, you must act on that good. It's imperative. It's not a passive observation of your own goodness. With that goodness that is in you come responsibilities. So much for the mirror of evil. So what about the mirror of beauty? What do you see when you look into the mirror of beauty? Well, the first thing that you see, which actually allows you to look at beauty and recognize it, is the beauty of your looking at it. It's the beauty in yourself. Your capacity to perceive beauty is the first thing that you see in the mirror of beauty, and that is a synergetic proposition. In other words, the reflection of beauty increases the perception of beauty. And one thing that I can assure you is that the more beauty you see, the more there is to see. So let's suppose that we're living in the beauty to come, and the mirror of beauty is reflecting the world to you. Not the mirror of evil, which is now reflecting the world to you, but the mirror of beauty. And what do you see? What do you see there? Well, the mirror of beauty has the property of a fractal maze, like a honeycomb. It has many facets. It has a granular surface. So when you look into the mirror of beauty, you see things in granular detail. You see many, many little scenes that compose a vast mosaic of scenes. So think again of the honeycomb, the lattice of the honeycomb of bees. And in each hexagonal facet of the lattice, you see a scene of beauty. And there are countless scenes of beauty. People enjoying life, people congregating with those they choose to congregate with. Social scenes, cafes, restaurants, busy scenes at airports. You see people in these scenes enjoying the freedom of social life, meeting those they love, meeting new people, making friends. You see a little facet of a scene where you see yourself making a new friend. You see people helping each other, supporting each other to rebuild the world. You see scenes of enthusiasm when people undertake work, because work is essential to the dignity of the human animal. It's not merely essential to earn one's living, to have food, clothing, and shelter, but it's morally essential to work. So as people go back to work and rebuild the social order from the ground up on the ruins of the old world, which is collapsing now, there are many scenes and many occasions for beauty. People in nature, people dancing and singing, great consorts of people gathered together at concerts of music, packed together in an auditorium or a theater, listening to the beauty of music and dance. You see everything that is beautiful and good and true in all of those facets of the honeycomb mirror of beauty. But where do you see murder? What kind of scene can you picture in that vast, granular mirror of beauty? What does it look like? What form does it take, the act of murder in the mirror of beauty? It is most certainly there. So look closely. See if you can see it. I realize it's possible that you may not see it, and you may not want to see it. You may think that in the beauty to come, there's no place for such a violent and horrific act. One human animal taking the life of another. You may think that it won't be there. So you might have a blind spot. And I can tell you right now, if you do, where that blind spot is located. The blind spot that doesn't allow you to see murder in the mirror of beauty. It's located in the concept of vengeance. So if you have in your mind a concept of vengeance, it depends on how you hold that concept, whether or not you will be able to see it in that mirror. In other words, you need to bring something to the mirror to see this particular action called vengeance. So think about vengeance and think about what it is to you, how you consider it, how you formulate it in your mind. So I'm going to describe to you a scene of vengeance to be observed in the mirror of beauty in the time to come. It's just a hypothetical scene. You can say I'm going to play act something, which is a glimpse of something that is due to happen, cannot be stopped, cannot be prevented. But before I describe that little scenario, I'd like to make one distinction really clear. Vengeance is not punishment. What you see in the mirror of evil today is punishment on a colossal scale. There are many ways to punish human beings, many cruel and twisted ways. What's outstanding today are two forms of punishment. The first form is to deprive people of work. That is a vicious, brutal form of punishment. Because, as I noted before, the purpose of work is not merely for survival. Work has a moral value. It gives purpose to human existence. If you make it impossible for people to work and you destroy their jobs and their businesses, that is a momentous act of cruelty and punishment and murder. Also, another act of punishment that you can see everywhere today is the punishment for merely being alive, for breathing. The authorities tell people that we are all infected. We might be infected. And because we might be infected, we are walking bioweapons. And the very air we breathe is poisoned by an invisible microbe. And so, in effect, populations across the world are being punished for breathing. How cruel can it get? How absurd can it get? But that is, in reality, the situation in the world today. But vengeance is not punishment. And in the world to come, the world of the next social order, built on the ruins of the present social order, there is no punishment, but also there is no forgiveness. Reflect on that. No punishment and no forgiveness. So here's the little scene. I propose you play along with me and just imagine looking into one facet of the mirror of beauty where vengeance happens. And it's beautiful. So picture, say, a room in a building in a large city or a medium-sized city, and this building was the center of the local television network. So all broadcasts went out from a studio in this building, and there were offices where all the people worked, including the people who technically ran it, the people who were involved in organizing what is called the news. Of course, the news today is not news. It's not new, and it is not based on facts and evidence. The news merely consists of a series of reports. So people appear on the television, men and women, dressed up in a certain way, made up in a certain way. They all have expensive hairdos. They all have a certain look. And they sit there and broadcast reports. And these reports never have anything behind them. They are never supported by facts or evidence or the truth. So they are simply made-up reports. So those who sit in front of the camera are not reporters. In fact, there are no reporters in this organization. There are simply people who receive dispatches, documents, telling them what to say. They are who have orders to follow. And they simply do as they're told, and they read the reports. So let's call such a person a reader. And in this building, let's say there's a room, an office, and in that office is one of these readers. Let's say he's a man of his mid-30s. And he happens to be in the building at the time. And let's say he's going over some of his files, or maybe collecting some files. But there he is. He's one of those people employed by a reporting agency to speak on public television. And as he's in the room, sitting at his desk, the door opens, and 3 people come into the room. One of them is an older man, say 50-something, and there are 2 younger people, a man and a woman, say in their late 20s. And they walk into the room together. And they take 3 chairs and they sit down in front of the man sitting across them at the desk. And they proceed to have a conversation. Now, there are many ways this conversation could go, and I could go on for a long time developing it. I'll try to be as brief as possible in presenting this little scenario to you. What is the first thing that happens? Well, of course, the man asks them, well, who are you? They've appeared suddenly. He doesn't know these people. And there they are in his office. And they're sitting there, by the way, in such a way that he would have to go past them to get to the door and leave his office. So he says, who are you? And the older man says, we're VLAD. VLAD. And he says, you don't have to know who we are as individual persons, because each one of us is VLAD, and together we're VLAD, and many, many others who are not here, but who are with us in motivation and purpose, they are also VLAD. Well, of course, it's possible that the reader, news reader, as they are facetiously called, might draw a reference from that, or maybe not. You might know who VLAD is. VLAD the Impaler was a Romanian prince, and the legend of the vampire, Dracula, is connected to that figure. There's a great movie about Vlad, by the way. I'll link it in the description. It tells the true story of who Vlad was and what he did. And it's a great romance and a story of love and war. In any case, whether or not the news reader happens to make that allusion, the conversation proceeds. And the man, let's say speaking for the younger two, he says, yes, Vlad is here to offer you an opportunity. That's what Vlad does. And Vlad is doing this all around the world now. The man responds, well, what? I don't follow you. He's a little scared and ruffled, obviously. Well, what you mean? What sort of opportunity? Well, it's the opportunity to live in truth and beauty, as many people are now doing, since we have overcome the enemies of life and we've defeated the psychopaths who wanted to remake the world in their own image. So now there's a new world. We call it the next world, in the making. And Vlad is here to invite you into that new world. So the man is puzzled. Obviously, he feels threatened. He thinks he might bolt from his chair, but something tells him to sit still because he wouldn't get very far. There's a firm, menacing air coming from those three people. So he decides that the best thing to do is kind of play along. So he says, well, what opportunity are you talking about? And the older man says, it's the opportunity to live in a different way than you did before. But in order for you to take that opportunity, you must admit how you were living before and what you did. So the conversation proceeds, and the man is obviously baffled, afraid, but he decides that he better play along because that's the only way he's going to get out of this situation, right? So he continues to listen, and the older man says, Vlad knows, and many others know, that you broadcast lies from this studio, from this building. You were a part of an organization that spread lies across the world, one particular lie about the virus voodoo. And due to the spreading of that lie, you inflicted enormous harm on countless people. You were an accomplice to harm and to distress, to mental and emotional and spiritual distress, and you were, in effect, an accomplice to murder. The enforcement of the lie that you told deprived many people of their dignity, of their basic, essential liberties in life. Not their rights, but the liberties and necessities of every human animal. And you were an accomplice in an agenda that destroyed all that. Now, Vlad has one question for you. Two, really. The first question leads to the second. So the first question Vlad wants to ask you is, do you admit that you lied? So, of course, the man tries to avoid the question, but the other two younger people begin to participate now, and they interrogate him in a rigorous way. This might go on for a period of time, but eventually he breaks down and he says, well, yes, I know now that it was a lie, and Many, many people know this. In fact, almost everyone knows it now. But I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that I was lying. I was just repeating what I was told, and I thought it was the truth at the time. So you see, he's pleading to be, what is the word? Acquitted. He's pleading to be acquitted from the crimes against humanity in which he played a role. Him and thousands of others who worked in the media. I'm going to call him the media man. Media man, media woman. So the conversation reaches a turning point. And the older man says to the media man, well, whether or not you knew it was a lie, you did propagate it at great cost to many people in the world. It was an evil, hateful, punitive, and destructive lie, and you propagated that lie. So, first question, are you willing to admit whether or not you knew it was a lie doesn't make any difference? Are you willing to admit the harm and evil that you committed on the world by what you did? And this question is really difficult. So the media man contemplates it for a moment. You can see his thoughts racing. And he arrives at the conclusion, well, yeah, it's a different world now, and I guess if I admit that, then I would be admitted to this new world where truth and beauty and goodness prevail. Maybe I can get myself off and get myself out of this strange situation that I'm in. So he admits, yes, he was an accomplice in this crime against humanity perpetrated by the lie of the virus voodoo. In fact, the voodoo is the lie. The lie is the voodoo. So at this point, the conversation has certainly reached almost a climax. And the three individuals look at each other and nod very calmly. And now it's the turn for the young woman to speak. And she says, in a steady and neutral voice, well, that's the right thing to do. Because by doing that and by admitting your responsibility in supporting this horrible crime, Vlad offers you an opportunity to live. You see? Every breath you take from this moment on is a breath you take in a new world and a new life. So you can put that behind you, thanks to Vlad, and you can come into this new world. Vlad gives you the opportunity to live in a different way. And you can start right now. No problem. That's why Vlad is here. Vlad is here to give you the opportunity to start a new life. Just think about that for a moment. Just feel what it's like. Take a few breaths. And she goes silent, and the three of them watch the media man very carefully as he sighs, and he takes a deep breath and 2 or 3 breaths. And the girl says to him, the young woman, there you go. You see? Those are the first breaths of your new life. And he nods. And now the young man speaks, and he says, there's just one more condition that Vlad requires for you to enter the new life. And the man says, yes, what is that? You know, he's a little frightened again. And the young man says, well, Vlad requires that you say, thank you. that you show gratitude for being given this opportunity to live. And that statement really hits the man really hard. And at first he doesn't know what to make of it, but then, of course, well, it makes perfect sense. When you look at the whole situation, when you look at the way the conversation developed, yeah, sure, of course, he's grateful that he's going to be able to live, isn't he? And so the older man speaks and says, well, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to say thank you to Vlad? So at this point, the medium man is still tense, obviously. He feels a certain sense of relief. And he's thinking, oh, wow. Well, I guess someone's just here to make me confess. And, I guess that's all there is to it. And actually, it does really feel good to say the truth about what I did. And if that's all there is to it, well, of course, only natural for me to be grateful. So he gathers his wits together, and he looks at the three of them one at a time, and then he looks at the older man and he says, thank you, Vlad. And then there's a pause. And the three people look at each other. They exchange looks, quiet, sober, calm. And they nod their heads slowly. And then the younger man reaches into a leather case. He has a leather case hanging on his shoulder with a strap. And he reaches in and he takes out a gun. And he holds it up and he points it at the medium man. And he points it very precisely to that place that is just above the V of the collarbones. He sort of aims for that V. Go ahead. Put your finger up there. Feel where that is. The bottom of your neck. That soft place. He aims, and his aim is good, precisely at that point. And then he says to the medium man, Vlad accepts your gratitude. You've done the right thing in the first step you've taken in your new life by saying, thank you, Vlad. And this is how Vlad says, you're welcome.